Hey guys, I'm Carly Bailey, and this is Cowgirl Up. You may or may not have heard of me before, but I was previously in a few publications, and I also did an episode of Crime Watch Daily with Warner Brothers when Ben Carson decided to run for president back in 2016 because I was actually one of his patients in 1997. Before I get started, I want to thank some people who made all of this possible. First, I of course want to thank God for letting me live and giving me an incredible story to tell. Next, I want to thank DJ Tay 1013 and the Visual Dramatics Network for both believing in me and giving me this opportunity to help others. Lastly, I want to thank some station sponsors. Just bear with me one moment. Sounds of a Soldier Productions, Uppercut Records, the Entree Musician Podcast, Wirecast, Flying Squirrel Imagery, and Diamond VIP Services. So thanks everyone for making this a reality. Now, without further ado, let's get to it. Little bit of my background. I was born and raised in Florida. I'm the epitome of a townie. I grew up riding horses. My mom actually bought a horse farm when I was 7 because her and my dad divorced. So I spent half the time at her house and half the time at my dad's house. Now, I actually don't ride anymore. I was in love with it, but I don't ride anymore because of a pretty bad car accident that I actually shouldn't have walked away from. I was 19 years old, and I was working 2 jobs, and I went to school full time. I was driving back from a sales meeting on the Howard Franklin Bridge. So I was driving back from Tampa to St. Pete. I was going pretty fast, and I definitely had not eaten that day. I just remember the world spinning, and I was actually flipping my car across 4 lanes of traffic and off the Howard Franklin Bridge into the water. I remember being absolutely stunned when the water started hitting my face. I obviously wasn't really with it, so I didn't know what was happening, but I soon figured it out. I was very skinny in those days because, like I said, I didn't eat. So I actually was 86 pounds, and I wiggled out of my seatbelt. Now, then I banged out the window with my elbow, and I swam out the window to like the seawall that was covered in barnacles. I was definitely still in shock. I couldn't accept the situation at hand. I was freaking out because that was my car. That was like my life, my livelihood right there. So anyway, I just remember hearing a bunch of cars on the bridge like screech to a halt. And they were, obviously coming to help me because they saw me go off. Now, I had seen way too many Lifetime movies because I thought that they were coming to kill me. So when they showed up and were just like, yo, give me your hand, I was like, nah, that's all right, I'm good. They just looked at me like I had 2 heads because they were like, honey, you're bleeding and there are sharks. Like, give me your hand. So I figured I'd take my chances and go with them. So they pulled me up. They called an ambulance for me against my protests. They called an ambulance for me. The ambulance actually, tested me for, to see if I was drinking, and that's why this happened? No. They finally tested my blood sugar, and it was at 35. And they determined that was why this happened. They also took my pulse, couldn't get one of those. So they were like, yeah, clearly you're not dead, so I don't know what's going on with you. So they took me to the hospital, and I don't remember much of anything that went on. I was still really out of it. I remember it being freezing in the ambulance because I was soaking wet, but they took me to the hospital, and I just remember a cop coming in and meeting with my parents, not even asking how I was, anything about if I was okay. They just they hit my parents with $1,000 bill because I took out the fence when I was flipping and everything. I took it out. So they hit them with a bill. Now, after I was released from the hospital, it was 2 weeks after the accident that I just couldn't get past my neck hurting so much. So my mom finally talked me into going to a chiropractor, which I had never been to before. But the chiropractor did his scans or whatever, and turns out my neck was about a half an inch away from being completely off its axis. He said I had been walking around with a broken neck for 2 weeks, legally broken neck. Now after that, after I, somewhat recovered, I am a bit hard-headed. I will tell you that right now. I continued to ride for about another 10 years or so. My horse, my sweet horse, Mo, I actually rescued him when he was 3 years old from a farm in Tampa, and I broke him myself. He wasn't broke to ride, so I wanted to do it the gentle way, because I know that the cowboys, they kind of are rough with them when they break them, because they are breaking their spirit to be able to have someone ride them. So I broke him myself, and it took me a while to do that because I didn't want to, scare him or, make him mean, because the reason I got him is because I fell in love with his little personality. So I broke him, and this was after it was pretty much already done. I broke him, and I was super excited to show it off, right? So I come out of the riding arena, and I come up to the back of my barn where everybody is just sort of gathered, and I go to show people, but I'm not on him yet. I got off of him while I walked him up, and I wanted to show everyone. So I had someone hold him. It was one of my boarder's dads who didn't really know a lot about horses. So he was holding him by the face, and he couldn't, move his head to see what was going on around him. All he saw in his peripheral vision was me swinging up in the air and up to land on his back. Well, he flipped out, and that's all I remember. But I'm told what happened was that I flipped, or I was thrown 10 feet in the air, and then I came down. When I hit the ground, I hit it right on my neck. So yeah, I woke up in the hospital. My sister had already driven down from Tallahassee at that point, and my dad was there too. But when I woke up, I saw the pain in their eyes. So I quit, just like that. Now, I didn't want to end up like Christopher Reeves, and I knew that they didn't want me to end up like Christopher Reeves. Christopher Reeves, I will always remember hearing this story. Christopher Reeves, Superman, you're probably familiar with it as well, but as you know, he was Superman. He was in shape. He knew how to ride horses. It's what he loved doing. He had done it for a long time. And that was just like me. Yet he was in great shape, and I was, you know, my back was horrible, my neck was horrible. Like, I was just like asking for some disaster to happen. So I quit. I didn't want to get a spinal cord injury. Now, do I miss it? Yes. But do I regret it? No. My whole life changed in 1995. I was 7 years old when I was diagnosed with a pilocytic astrocytoma, brain tumor. I was only in second grade, and I didn't understand much of what was going on. Now, I loved school and learning and even homework. Yes, I was a complete and total nerd. I was sick a lot in school in those days. The teachers didn't know what was going on with me. I was often sick inside the classroom. I would throw up. And how it would start is I would get a horrible headache, like worse than any migraine I've ever had. Then the only thing that would relieve the pain is vomiting. And I would often vomit on the floor because I couldn't make it to the bathroom in time. Then I would fall asleep on my desk, and you really could not even keep me awake in those days. My parents finally took me to get a CAT scan. And see, my pediatrician kept saying it was just a sinus infection. So she was pumping me full of these drugs for a sinus infection, and it wasn't getting any better. So my dad took me for that CAT scan with obviously an order from her. And the technician messed up and took a scan of my whole head. And that's when they found the tumor the size of a softball on my brainstem. Well, needless to say, I went in for surgery shortly thereafter at All Children's Hospital. And I spent 48 days in the hospital. That included over a Christmas. I put these nurses through hell. I was 7. I was spoiled, and I had my own private room. I had a big Christmas tree, and I don't know how they swung it, but somehow I had lights all over my tree. And now I'm told that they're not allowed to do that anymore, I guess, because of some fire code regulations. I don't know. But I'm actually very thankful for this situation now because it made me who I am today. And I always make the best of every situation in life because life's too short. Now, when I was in 4th grade, after that surgery, when I was in 4th grade, the tumor came back. The tumor was benign, but it had malignant tendencies. That is why it came back. You know, so it didn't grow in different areas of my body. It all stayed on the brainstem, but it was just getting bigger and bigger every day. So when I was in 4th grade, we flew to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. That is where we met Dr. Carson. My mom didn't like Dr. Carson. She didn't want him touching me because he was arrogant in our pre-surgery appointment. Now, she didn't want him touching me, but I was also throwing up all over that waiting room. So my hydrocephalus was obviously an emergency. Hydrocephalus is the fluid on the brain, the fluid on my ventricles on top of my head. So what she wanted him to do is just revise my shunt. My shunt is the the drain that goes from my ventricles. It goes all the way down here in my chest and then into my abdomen on this side. Now, she just wanted him to revise it, meaning, you know, because it gets clogged. The little holes get clogged sometimes. And so they're not able to drain fluid and it's not able to do its job. She wanted him to just go in, fix that, and then we would go somewhere else for the actual surgery because she didn't like his attitude. But my dad talked her into letting him operate since I would already be on the table and under the anesthesia, so it would save me like having to go through all of that again. Now, I want to mention right here that even though I was vomiting stomach bile, he decided to go away for the weekend. This was a Friday that I came in and met him and was throwing up, obviously very sick. And he decided to go away for the weekend. And he said that he would come back and operate on me on Monday. Now, I describe my near-death experiences that I had that weekend in my book, Cowgirl Up, currently awaiting publication. But I just can't, that blows my mind how he could do that. I don't know. But anyway, after the surgery there with Dr. Carson, I woke up paralyzed on my right side completely. I was panicking. This was a little girl who did cheerleading and gymnastics and baton, and now I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even itch my face. Dr. Carson came into my room, and I'll never forget it that day. He told my parents that it was temporary and the damage would go away in a few days. Now, he knew that it was not because he cut my cranial nerves and he wrote about it in his operative report. After briefly staying at Johns Hopkins, I don't remember for how long, but I remember I did stay there for like maybe a week, 2 tops. but because they just wanted to make sure I was stable enough to travel back home. So I went back home and I immediately went to HealthSouth Rehabilitation Center, where I spent 2 weeks in inpatient therapy and 7 months of outpatient therapy. So obviously, because I was in such bad condition, I was still in a wheelchair and I couldn't really talk. I actually was homeschooled for 4th grade. I, at HealthSouth, when I was there for inpatient therapy, I tested mentally retarded. This was really hard for my parents. They didn't tell me this for a long time. This was really hard for them because prior to my surgery, I was tested at school and I was very gifted in a lot of subjects. I tested a couple of years beyond grade level in a couple of them. Speaking of school and how everything changed, I used to be really, really good at math before this happened. And now I do not even balance my checkbook. A lot of things changed for me after that surgery. I used to be right-handed, and I used to be very scientific and, like I said, math-oriented. Everything changed. Now, when I was in HealthSouth for that time period, these were very long and excruciating days. 5 days a week for 7 hours a day. I would go to therapy, many different therapies at HealthSouth, physical, occupational, speech, aquatic, psychological. Yeah. So these were very long and excruciatingly painful days. I wanted to quit, but my physical therapist, Maggie, she reminded me why I'm doing this. I loved riding horses. I loved playing sports. I loved running around. And I couldn't do any of that in a wheelchair. So thank you, Maggie. If you're watching this, I owe you everything. Now, it would be nice if this was the end of my struggles, but no. The tumor did come back when I was 11. When I was 11, I was in, gosh, 1999. So I was still in elementary. We flew up to Massachusetts General Hospital. The tumor was removed, but they had to leave a little bit because of the risk of damaging my brainstem. When a tumor is attached to the brainstem, you can't get it all. Like, there's just no way. And that's what Dr. Carson decided that he was going to do, just unilaterally decided that. Now, this time, after we had the surgery where he only took what was reasonably safe. This time, we followed up the surgery with 6 weeks of proton radiation treatment when I was 12. And the third time is a charm. But my surgeries didn't stop there, because when I was either 13 or 14, I did have facial corrective surgery. And that surgery took nerves out of 2 places in my leg. One was on my inner thigh, and one was on the lower portion of my calf. And they strung them together. They like somehow attached them together, and then strung them over like they hung them over my ear and across my lip here, and then over this way to give me some movement back in my right side. Now, it was experimental. They didn't know if it would work at all, but it was my only shot, and it actually did work 70%. If it hadn't, you would definitely know, because I could talk, but you couldn't understand me because my mouth was so drooped, and my nose was like a J. It was like turning this way. So this surgery did work 70%. And I did go for another surgery after that, but it didn't really improve much at all. I had a gold weight inserted into my right eyelid when I was 19, I think. But yeah, I was definitely an adult. So anyway, that was my childhood. It was definitely never boring. Gave me some interesting perspectives on a lot of issues that I know other people don't share because they haven't been through everything that I have. Now, before I go, let me just drop some wisdom on you that I've learned throughout my crazy life. Now, my mom was one of 9 children, and her older sisters were very protective of her, just like I am of my little sister. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, we still fought like cats and dogs when we were younger. I mean, give you an example. Every single morning when my mom would drive us to school when we were at the horse farm, she would take this huge cup of coffee with her. I mean, it was filled to the brim. And our Zuzu had no shocks on it whatsoever. So we had to drive over these railroad tracks, and every morning, it would just spill a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. And I don't know why it bothered me so much, but that morning I was just like not having it. I was yelling at her so much, and I was being so mean, that finally she just pulled the car over and got out and was coming around to discipline me, when I went ahead and locked all the doors. I locked her out of the car because I just didn't want to get in trouble. Yeah, like that helped. But me being the genius that I am, I didn't lock the back hatch door. So she got in through that, and it was not a pretty picture. I mean, God, if you were just like a random person on the street like watching this, you would probably be like, oh my God, these people are nuts. But yeah, so and the example of how we fought like cats and dogs, I threatened my sister's life if she opened that door because I was not, I don't know what I planned, what my whole plan was. I don't really remember that much, or if I even had one. But yeah, so that was me. I can't believe she forgave me for that one. Now, in my eyes, though, I was allowed to be mean to her, but God help you if you were. I mean, I remember this time when my family took a cruise, and we took my grandparents on the cruise because it was their 75th wedding anniversary. Now, somehow my little sister managed to make an enemy very, very quickly on this cruise. I don't know exactly what she would do to her. I mean, I was busy hanging out with the other kids on the cruise who were my age. But anyway, that she hated this girl, and this girl hated her for some reason. And we were on an excursion one morning in a gift shop, actually, in Juneau, Alaska. We had docked, and it was our excursion. So I think pretty much a lot of people from the cruise were in that gift shop at that particular time because I remember we saw this girl, and that she must have done something. I think she made a little motion like just to scare my sister. She made a motion like this, and it worked because Sarah just kind of took off and like hid behind me or mom, and I saw the whole thing go down. And I'm sorry, but that's my little sister. Nobody is allowed to be mean to her but me. So I laid it out right there in the middle of the gift shop. I laid it out for that girl that she was not going to be mean to my little sister. And I would kick her butt if she ever was. The only one allowed to be mean to her was me. Now, case in point, just be good to your family. Cherish your family because they're not always going to be there. Now, this is just food for thought. I'm out of time today, but tune in next week for more Cowgirl Up. Catch you later, guys.